Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, I know many of you, we've met in several meetings, finance committee things. I'm Keith Boone, I'm your police chief. Just a little bit about me, I've been with the town since 2002, so I'm entering my 23rd year with the police department. Just finished my second year as police chief, and prior to that I spent 7 years as the deputy chief. So for about 10 years now, I've been working with whether it's the operating budget or the capital budget to put things together. So that's just a little bit about me and what a little bit of my background. So the common theme you're going to hear tonight is, we do more with less, and we're a very lean police department overall, which I'll get to. We have 38 full-time police officers right now, including myself and the deputy chief. And we actually lost a police officer position last year. When we were putting the budget together, we needed to find areas to save. The town had a shortfall, and really there was nowhere in our expense line to move from. We're extremely thin in our expense line, as everybody knows, with inflation and the soaring costs. Our expense line isn't even funded properly right now. So the only area we could look for savings was when we had a retirement, not fill that position. And believe me, we need it. There was just nowhere else to pull from. Our budget is $5,243,000, and that is 93% on people. So the people that are working for your police department, that's where that money is going to. The remaining 7% is in the expense side, like I explained, and really that's for training, maintenance of our building, our vehicles, technology needs, equipment needs, and supplies. Again, we have 41 full-time employees right now. We do have 2 civilian assistants and a full-time animal control officer. And really the only time you're going to see our budget increase is through collective bargaining. We typically are level funded every year, and that's where we start from, and we will adopt whatever collective bargaining calls for. So just to, actually we out of order here. So just to give you a snapshot of what our calls for service look like. This is not encompassing everything, believe me, but this is just to highlight some of the things and some of the more complex calls we're responding to. And you'll see, in the last 5 years, our calls have increased by 29%. 911 calls have gone up almost 150%. And we have some knowledge on why the 911 calls have gone up. You heard the regional dispatch center we merged with, we're in our 4th year. We were able to have a better product with cost savings. So now a 911 call can be made from a cell phone that's going to go directly to our center. Prior to that, you would get transferred to the state police, back to another PSAP, and by the time it got to us, you could have probably a 2-minute delay. But that came with a price. So we are getting 911 pocket calls. We are getting multiple calls. We have Borderland. We have a lot of places that people visit here. So any needs of 911 come directly to our regional center. Our calls and general calls for service are up almost 4,500, which is quite a bit considering. Our firearms licensing stays steady. We're a town that has, unfortunately, approximately 700 crashes a year. About 450 of those are serious that require a state mandated report. The rest are typically a paper exchange and maybe a tow, but it's a lot. It's gone up. We do everything we can to direct our resources to our hotspots, as we call them in town. I'm sure you all know them, Purchase and Turnpike, and Spooner and Sheridan is a new one now that has got a lot of influx in traffic. So we're targeting these areas to do the best we can, but we can't be everywhere at once. Our assaults have gone nil. They're staying steady, and our property crimes really exploded in the last 5 years. And that, as you see, car breaks, unlocked vehicles, it can be a multitude of things. Some of the shoplifting we see, Target has changed operations depending on their staffing. They have a loss prevention that will call us more now if they find shoplifting. So a lot of that is just driven by our call response. And again, I just wanted to mention, when I took over as chief in 2022, we had 39 police officers. That was the highest we've ever been, and we were there for a very short time. So within a year, we're starting to go backwards now with our staffing. And while it's not in here, one thing I worry about is we have another retirement coming up in 2025, and I don't look forward to having a conversation with our town administrator where we're gonna be in the same boat and we might have to not fund that position. So, as lean as we are, that's what gets me worried.
Chief, can I just highlight the last bullet you didn't enunciate, which is that while your 911 calls have gone up 150%, your staff's gone up 5.
Correct.
Thanks.
So I think you're gonna hear this per capita phrase quite a bit over the next few hours, but when we compare ourselves to our core communities and our surrounding communities, we're essentially last in every area. So we're last in our core, we're last in our surrounding communities, and we're second to last in our core communities, only exceeding Ashland in per capita spending. And this is something I talked about last year at our finance meeting. So for us to just be at the average of where these other police departments and other communities are, I would need to ask for another $800,000 in our budget, which would equate to 8 police officers. So we're not asking for that. It'd be great if we could get to that, but that doesn't put us at the high end either. That puts us at the average. So that's a large number to handle. And what does that look like in our staffing? You know, one area we're extremely lean in is our command staff. And I will get to that. I just want to point out one thing. So right now we have 38 police officers. So if we were to be at that average, again, that $800,000 number would put us at about 46 police officers. So again, that would be the average from chief down. And if you look at how we compared with all of our core communities and our surrounding communities, we have 1 police chief, 1 deputy chief, and 1 lieutenant. And what we're finding, which I've known, with these other towns, you're seeing 1 police chief, 1 deputy chief, and 3 lieutenants. And so all the towns have 3 lieutenants in our core and surrounding towns, with the exception of Ashland. They have 2 lieutenants, and they're much smaller in population and in department size. So that's just to give you a snapshot of what the command staff looks like. And where does that bring us? That leads to the police chief and the deputy chief doing a lot of patrol supervisory level things, which isn't ideal. And, you know, I hate to say it, but I've been hearing it for 23 years. It's just the way it's always been in our police department. I think you're going to hear that in the fire and DPW, that's just how it's always been. So we've had multiple hats that we've had to wear. If we were to staff properly, you'd see we would need, we'd be staffing at 1.9 per 1,000 residents. If we were looking at our core communities, at our surrounding communities, they're at 2.1. We're operating at 1.5 right now. So we're at a big disadvantage. So that's 23% behind our core communities and 41% behind just our surrounding towns. So again, these additional tasks with lower staffing, and I'd just like to talk about our staffing model. This is true. This is what our police department looks like from top to bottom. We do a lot of different things. And just to explain our staffing model, we have right now, tonight, and every day, we have 1 officer inside the police station that if you need a police officer, there's 1 there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have 4 officers on the road dedicated to calls for service. So what happens, we're bound by that for a multitude of reasons, but we have to have that on the road. And so the problem we run into is we try to look for ways to save overtime and to try to reinvest in other things in the department, but we are constantly needing to replace these officers when they're not at work. So we try to do everything we can on shift, whether it's training or having fleet maintenance done, but if an officer is out for any reason, we have to replace them. And so I just got a report last week. We just lost an officer on October 30th. He just got deployed for Washington, D.C., and he is going to be there for 4 months until the inauguration. So we get hit with things last minute that we can't control, whether it's an officer injury, someone needs long-term leave, a military deployment that just came. So we're going to lose this officer for really a third of the year. You know, he's got orders till February until the transition takes place, but who knows if he's going to get held longer. So now we have 1 less officer on our 4 to 12 shift, and that will translate into backfilling. Again, we have 1 lieutenant that we don't even have filled yet. We're actually having a promotional exam this month, so we will have one lieutenant by 2025. We're hoping early 2025. But again, that is, it's hurting the command staff not having that position. And as I get through the rest of these functions we're doing, you'll understand why. So we're an accredited police agency, so I won't bore you with all the ins and outs of accreditation, but simple way to say it is we're bound by best practices. We've been an accredited agency, which I'm very proud of, since 2011. And so we are mandated to adhere to over 350 best practice standards. Just recently, they upgraded the standards from 5th to 6th edition, so we had to overhaul our complete policy folder. That takes time. Right now, our accreditation manager serves as a patrol officer and our domestic violence officer. So I'm bringing her in off the road 1 day a week to work with the deputy chief and I on policy conformance. And so she's trying to answer calls, she's helping victims of domestic violence, and then I'm bringing her down to do policy review. Technology and IT. He's not here now, but there is one person in town named Mike Deltano that does all the town IT. So luckily, we have a police officer that came from the IT field, and we can troubleshoot our own network ourselves, but that's not ideal either. He works the midnight shift, so if we have a network problem and the town being as thin as it is with one IT person, and I have to bring him in, I have to pay him overtime to come troubleshoot. Firearms licensing. We have a large backlog of firearms licensing, and when the application comes in, we're bound to a certain time before we can process them. So we're under deadlines and mandates regularly with these things. Sex offender registration, field training, grant writing. The grant writing, you're looking at the 2 grant writers in the police department now, which should not be us, right? You know, I did it as a sergeant. And so we try to delegate what we can, but when we are sending officers to calls for service over and over, they don't have the time, and things, you know, will slip through the cracks. And so we have to take a better look at that. Our cruiser maintenance. I'll get to that slide later, but he's our community outreach officer. So in the middle of answering calls for service and helping the community, he's calling Dave Field's crew and trying to get our equipment fixed. Our firearms and equipment inventory, our maintenance, our property and evidence control officers, they both work the midnight shift. We have to bring them in on overtime to do anything to release property. Unfortunately, if you lost a wallet today and we found it, by policy, we have to lock it up to safeguard it. You know, if you need your wallet, I have to tell you, well, come in at midnight or come in at about 7:30 in the morning to see him before he comes to work. You know, we had something recently where someone needed their wallet to get on a plane. Obviously, we weren't going to say, yeah, you don't have to get on the plane, you can stay. We had to bring him in to actually release property. So things like that come up all the time. And what we found when we were looking at all these other police departments, almost this entire list you're looking at, they have lieutenants and sergeants dedicated to these positions. So their command staff is handling all these things so the patrol staff can handle the calls for service. And so when you start juggling all of these hats, you lose quality of service. And speaking of calls for service, you know, something that comes up is, I get asked a lot, is what drives our response? And we have three types of calls: priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. So priority 1 call is, unfortunately, the highest level. It's a life-threatening situation. I have examples up here. I'm not going to go through them. This is directly from our policy that guides us. But if we have this type of priority 1 call, we will need to send 2 officers. They go. That's mandatory. But in addition, the floating cars, or the roving cars or our sector cars, are also going to start roving that way because it's a priority call. So when that happens, and until we sort out what's going on, and we can be there for any length of time, there's no one available for calls in town. And so we rely on mutual aid, and unfortunately, you might have to see a West Bridgewater police officer if you have a fender bender or something happens. You might see a Rainham police officer, whoever we're calling for mutual aid. So our priority 2 calls, similar, urgent, but we don't call them life-threatening. But it is a domestic violence. We send 2 officers to these calls. Generally, an officer can call another officer off once he deems it safe, but you know, the problem we run into is we're only going by what the call taker is telling us. And if you have a panicked resident or citizen calling from a cell phone, and however it's communicated to the call taker is the way it's coming over the radio. So we can get a call that sounds very serious. By the time we get there, we can peel back, and it can go the other way. We get a call that doesn't sound serious, and we're calling for everybody to come and help. But again, if we have 2 officers dispatched to these calls and then another call comes in, we have nobody left to even properly respond to a priority call. This is the calls we like the most. These are our noise complaints and our barking dog calls. Typically, that would be a 1-officer response. But if you go through town and you ever see multiple police officers at an accident and it doesn't look that serious, there's a lot of things that go into that. When we go to an accident, fire shows up. We have an ambulance there, a fire engine there, we have a police officer there. That's a lot of stuff going on the road. And so we have to protect the drivers, the people that are there. So typically 1 officer is going to handle the call, the reporting action, and things like that. And we'll have 1 and sometimes 2 officers that have to direct traffic. And so if you ever see that and it doesn't look like it's a, quote, serious call, I don't like to call them routine because there's no such thing as a routine call, but that's some of the, just to give you some mindset of that's how it works. So you heard about regionalization earlier, and so again, we're constantly looking for ways to deliver the best services, which we do, and try to save money when we can. So about 6 years ago, we looked at this 911 operation, and it took a few years to get implemented. And so we're now in our 4th year, and we see the cost savings. We see this is paying dividends that I didn't even realize, and I was originally in the working group that was spearheading this. I put up radio infrastructure, and CAD and RMS there was just 2 things that I didn't know we would ever get. This was like a bonus. Being part of the regional center, they were available for grants that we wouldn't have been able to get. And so we got police and fire, our entire radio infrastructure paid for, over $1 million that we would have been doing a capital request, asking at town meeting. We're getting a new CAD and RMS system that cost $4 million because we have 4 towns running the regional center now.
Chief, can we just
Yep.
add an RMS is computer-aided dispatch records management
yes.
system,
Yeah.
right? And so these are the software systems that police and firefighters and dispatchers rely on when you call 911 so that they could rapidly pull up your information, get good information to the officers and firefighters. And what Chief's highlighting here is, as part of us regionalizing after years and years of planning and cutting our local costs in half in the operating budget, we also became eligible for state level grant funding for multiple millions in capital enhancements that likely we would just not be able to fund here. And so there's huge dividends when the town has been able to successfully implement these long-term regionalization plans. This came up at SEMREC yesterday when we were meeting, that these systems are going to put these departments in a better position, the residents of this community in a better position, and we're not having to hit local tax dollars. Even if we were able to go to town meeting, able to articulate and get the approval for, those 2 numbers are $5 million, think of the other items we would then have to not fund. Fleet equipment for public works, ambulances and fire trucks, school security enhancements. And so there's a really, really huge impact to doing programs like this.
And just on the cost savings, I did bring this up last year, and the town administrator will cringe when I say this, but as cost savings, you have a fire chief and a DPW director that provide us a bucket truck, and they get up on ladders, and they are fixing the equipment themselves. So we were able to literally Band-Aid our way through our radio problems with the people that work in this town, instead of being able to sub this out and hire industrial communications that are going to cost tens of thousands of dollars we don't have. Our radio line item is $6,000 annually. So 1 portable radio in that line item is gone. So just kudos to what you'll hear tonight is we all do a lot for each other, and it pays dividends when it comes to accounting, believe me. Just some more regional things to talk about. I don't have it mentioned here, but we've had so many, 11 missing people this year that we've been fortunate enough to find. And having this regional center, they were able to deploy drones and actually send real-time photos and information to our cell phones. And we had someone just out here, out on Elm Street, that he happened to actually come in and find, but it was geared towards how the wreck was able to have eyes telling the boots on the ground what was going on. And police, fire were out there. We were actually able to save someone's life. It was cold night, and they wouldn't have survived. And so there's a lot of things going on with our SEMREC and with our regional center that, you know, we probably should do a better job at promoting and explaining that, and I will when it comes to budget meetings. But there's a lot of things that go behind the way that we just could not afford to do on our own that we're getting once we regionalized. Another area of regionalization is the Metropolitan Law Enforcement Council. We have access to critical response teams at no cost. Mobile units, which I'll be relying on heavily. We're going to hit 300-year anniversary starting in January. We have significant amounts of events. We're expecting large turnouts, so I will be able to tap into 23 different member agencies that will provide police and resources for us at no cost to the town. So,
can you just expand on that for folks who are not familiar with law enforcement operations? There's been some good feedback from members about the challenge that we face as a community is the kind of perception reality gap, right? There's going to be parades with probably very tricked out, expensive SWAT vehicles. Those aren't yours.
no.
Right.
No,
We don't own those, right? And we're not paying for them either.
We're not paying for it.
But that's really important because I think your average person might think like, oh, we have a SWAT team. We do not have a SWAT team. There's a regional multi-agency response team.
Correct.
But I think that's really important, right? Because that's been a good learning experience for me on this committee is hearing that so frequently from so many members.
You'll typically find large agencies in cities like Brockton they have their own, but the cost to develop our own team and train like that would be it would be detrimental to the department. We wouldn't be able to afford it. So when this regionalization opportunity came up with, we called them Metrolec, that gave us the opportunity to be part of it, and we pay back. We have an officer involved in the mountain bike unit. We have an officer on the critical stress team. So if someone's having a problem, we can lend an officer to them for a period of time. And so that's how it works. It's a mutual aid agreement. So just some of the mandates that we have, you know, there was a Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission that was developed several years ago. Each police officer is mandated to be certified. Again, we don't have multiple lieutenants, so this falls on the two people sitting before you. The way this works is there are certain criteria that you have to hit to maintain police officer certification, and the state has decided to break it up into thirds, so alphabetically. So every year I have to certify a third of the police department. And so it's not like a one and done, we'll see you in 3 years. So we're constantly doing this, and we do a lot of training because of that. We're mandated to do certain de-escalation training and our in-service training. Last year, as cost savings, we were able to use the fire department to do our CPR training. The law changed. Now I can't rely on the fire department. We have to actually send them to the MPTC trained instructor. They're going on overtime to that training, so that's just another mandate that we have to do that we can't get around. We do a lot of training with the schools. We just had a lockdown training with the schools, and we should be doing more. Like, we should be training. We do it with police and fire. We bring in DPW. We do a lot together, which is good.
I can speak to the body cameras.
And yeah, I'll turn over to the body camera portion of it because Deputy Chief Adams is the one that actually wrote a grant that we got. I'll let him speak about that, and he oversees the program for us.
So for about a year, we've had body cameras. I don't know if you've noticed them. All our officers are wearing them on patrol now. That was grant funded. Probably about 2/3 of it is grant funded currently, and will be for the next couple of years. But I think it's important to note that once that grant funding runs out and this contract runs out, we'll be on the hook for the full cost, which with the increase in pricing, I would expect to be, $30,000 a year, give or take, with cloud storage costs, equipment costs. Also important to note with that is when we wrote this grant, it was recommended that one full-time position is dedicated for every 75 cameras, and that wasn't grant funded. And they made that known that you had to absorb that position. And with us having 40 cameras, 38 officers, it's basically a half of a full-time equivalent position should be dedicated to managing the program. It now falls on me and our records access officer or our administrative records clerk, and it creates a lot of work. I mean, we have to conduct audits, we have to fix the equipment as it goes down. I mean, these are being worn every day by all these officers, and another big component is court records, right? Because every case that has body cameras attached, they have to get that footage. And in addition to that, it's public records. So body worn camera footage in general is a public record. So we will get a request, and if we have something simple like a motor vehicle crash, where there's 3 officers on scene for 30 minutes, that's an hour and a half of footage, and we have to watch every single moment of it, and sometimes frame by frame redact this footage, because if our computer screen shows your name and your license number, that has to be redacted. Like, that's not a public record. If an officer says your name, date of birth, social, license number over the radio, I have to go in and mute that manually. So the standard is basically whatever time the video is, it's going to take you 4 times as long to redact. So a 30-minute call with 3 officers, an hour and a half, you're looking at 6 hours of work to redact. So that's on top of the records request we already are processing. And thank God our records clerk, Leslie Buckley, is amazing, and she's helping me with those redactions. But it's definitely that half of a position that should be allocated to an administrative ranking officer.
Which if we do get to a spot where we have multiple lieutenants, that these types of things fall on that high-level command that we just don't have. Another mandate, domestic violence. We're required to submit certain documentation to the district attorney's office on certain types of domestic violence, whether it's strangulation or sexual assault. So all of these things have to get done. And again, the only 2 officers that aren't in minimum staffing, other than our detectives, are sitting in front of you. So we are constantly relying on that patrol staff to wear multiple hats. And so you heard a little bit about the community outreach and the mental health. This is something I'm very passionate and proud of. It's something the town, the people before you, I give my credit to the town administrator for helping get this rolling out. This town has a dedicated mental health clinician. Not a lot of towns have that, so it puts us far and above ahead of a lot of these towns. So what I've done is I've dedicated one officer who also does our fleet maintenance. I've taken him out of our staffing 2 days a week, only 2 days a week. The goal is to get him to 5 days a week. And we are going out on follow-ups, and we're trying to address a lot of these substance abuse and mental health issues that we see in town. And through October, I ran these on Halloween, we've had 204 follow-ups just this year. And so they range from, again, mental health, substance abuse, any type of quality of life problem that falls into that category. Our overdose numbers have gone down. We, unfortunately, were averaging about 30 a year for many years, and as of today, that's where our numbers are as of Halloween when I ran our numbers. Which is a good thing. The officers all have Narcan and AEDs, so we're able to deploy that if needed. But something that's, I think, important to note is detox programs. Our mental health clinician, Stephanie, she has access and a knowledge base that we just didn't have before. So if you or a family member need help that you weren't able to get prior, she can find detox programs that we just couldn't find before. And we have good success stories where not only have we gotten people in there, we've had to drive them there. And these 2 on this photo behind me have actually driven people to detox because they normally would have said, yeah, I can't get there, my license is suspended. Okay, get in the car and we'll drive you. So we're doing such good things that, we haven't had a real opportunity to talk about because it's so new, but I wanted to take this tonight to explain that there's a lot of good things going on in the town, and part of this is trying to, if we can do these 204 follow-ups, maybe we don't have to see them again, and that's the goal. So the first time we're dealing with them isn't a catastrophic issue, because prior to this, it was really police and fire were showing up to these calls, treating them the best we could, and then bringing them to the Good Samaritan Hospital, and unfortunately, they'd walk out within 8 hours, and it was just a revolving door that we've all talked about as groups of how can we get better, and this was something that I'm proud of as a town, as a resident, that this is available. This is a great thing for the town of Easton.
I think it's also important to note that this is certainly a full-time position for our outreach officer, and at the current time, we can only dedicate about 2 days a week to this.
So this is my final slide. You know, when we talk about, budgets and where we go, and I just want to reiterate, we are as lean as you can be. And I think, again, we're people, like that's where we are. There's no real expense that we can cut. Everything you see is the police officers that are working in town. And we're already starting at an $800,000 disadvantage if we want to be on average with our peers. And that's a very large number to say. Again, that equates to 8 fewer officers and half of the command staff of our comparable communities. So when these conversations come up and, I talk to my counterparts in other towns and I say, what do you do when you have to cut 3%, 5%? Where do you look from? These are the things that you're seeing in the industry. Some police departments are closing their police stations and they're calling it a dark station. And honestly, that's like embarrassing to me, like as a resident and as a police chief, to actually close the door and have a doorbell, really, call 911 if you need us, or hit a buzzer, and our regional center will send an officer that's on the road to come back to the police station to meet you. I just can't fathom being a lifelong resident of this town, not being able to walk into your police station at any time for any problem and not having somebody there to help you. So,
Or even call the station.
or not even be able to make a phone call because no one's there. So forcing our residents to call 911 to get a call taker to say, okay, wait on Lothrop Street, we'll send them. Not a good thing, but not to criticize these other towns, but that was the only path they had in some of these other towns. Just not something I would want to ever see here. Patrol availability. If we were ever to reduce our patrol staff, you saw the slides about our priority calls. If we reduced our staff from 4 to 3, for example, one priority call disables us for the entire length of the call. Detectives. We're running 3 detectives now, really 3.5, because we've got creative. We can't make a 4th detective, so our court officer mirrors as a detective when he returns from court. Our detectives do a great job. If you follow our Facebook page, I did give them kudos not too long ago. We were part of a town that was hit with a multi-theft car ring, multi-state, and one of our detectives was part of solving that. We have these porch pirates, as they call them, just recently. They're tracking UPS and FedEx and Amazon, and they're getting the drop on when people are getting things dropped at their house, and then they're really stalking the delivery drivers and then stealing from their property. We just solved a crime like that the other day. Detectives get any thinner, we can't do those things. Then we're mandated to what we're obligated to: sexual assaults, sudden deaths, and we really start turning into a 1990s police department. Really, you just will show up when we can and do bare bones. And again, as a resident, that's embarrassing. I expect more from my police department. Response time suffers, administrative delays, again, records processing. We're under the microscope with a lot of these time constraints with records requests. We have to respond, we have to get these done. A lot of towns start getting hybrid with their school resource officer positions. And that's something I would never want to see. They contribute funding for us. And other than meeting with the town administrator, my first week as police chief, I met with the superintendent and we said, how can we figure out how to get a police officer back in the school? This is a good thing. And you can feel it in the community now, what a good thing it is having that relationship back with our students. Our community mental health program, a lot of towns are now trying to figure out how they can share someone, and they're getting a watered down version of it. Again, we've had 204 contacts with the public. I wouldn't want to see that go away. These people desperately need the help, and that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're here for. So as lean as we are, I don't see anywhere else where, if we were to lose funding, it just turns into positions, really. There's, not funding a police cruiser 1 year isn't going to do anything. It really comes down to the people on the ground. Mm-hmm. So thank you for listening. I know we're going to have some Q&A afterwards, so any questions I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Deputy.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Deputy Chief.